Hello, it's Lion here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're going to be doing another manga review. Today we're looking at Fire Force Arc 2, or the versus Company 5 arc. I think that's the correct name for it. So, yeah, I already did the book facts, so I don't really have to mention them again. So let me just tell you where in this book, this omnibus, the second arc is located. And that would be here between these two segments here. So it starts at this one and it ends here. And it's a pretty small segment. I think the first arc was 13 chapters, and this one is only 8. And this has 21 chapters total. No, it has 25 chapters total. So it goes from page 349 to 477, I think, is where it starts, where it ends. Or sorry, 495. So it's about 100 pages, but it's actually not that much there. So the premise for this part of the story is that Iris, who happens to have a connection with Hibana, the leader of Company 5, runs off, and she goes to meet Hibana late at night. But this leads to her being captured and then used, and it leads to an inter-company battle between Company 5 and Company 8. And it's a pretty interesting arc. I quite liked it. It gives us a lot of new knowledge about the story. It actually kind of ramps up the storytelling quite a bit. And it gets pretty fast, like in terms of like the world building and the reason for the existence and, you know, stuff like that. It ramps up the way that you get introduced to things quite a bit. So it's kind of interesting. So let's move on to the plot line here. Iris and Hibana connect. They meet up. And the next day, Shinra and the chiefs meet to tell him what the company is actually trying to do. Basically, Company 8 is a company based purely on the idea of actually saving people and not for a secondary kind of like political aspect. However, they have a secret mission, and that is to infiltrate or somehow get information on the other companies, so they can figure out who's in charge of what, where they're getting their funding, and see where, you know, the information for the spontaneous human combustion is hidden, because it's something that has been searched for a long time, but the companies don't actually share information with each other. And so it seems like one of them has already found out the issue, but no one is trying to actually solve the problem because it keeps them in power. So very interesting, and this is part of why Company 8 has existed or been formed, right? And then they do training. Eventually, Iris goes missing, which is when she went to see Hibana at Company 5's headquarters, and it goes badly because she gets to the building, she confronts Hibana, and then is used as bait to bring the rest of her company so that they can take them down and get rid of them. And it's kind of interesting. Shinra is the first one to arrive, obviously, because he has the most directly useful firepower in order to travel, because he can just use it like rockets. So he rockets over to Company 5. He arrives, and eventually the rest of the 8th Company gets there, and Shinra is told to advance, while the rest of the team holds the line, right? So we actually get to see a lot of badass fights here with Maki and Hinawa, and they show off their abilities, and, you know, they basically take down everyone in Company 5 except for Hibana and a few of the Angels 3. And there's a kind of a bit of a issue here because Arthur has a fight as well, but the fight that he has is really boring and not exciting, and it just makes him look like a doofus in like the worst way possible. And I don't really understand what the point of it was. If it was comedy, I think it failed completely. If it was a thing to kind of develop Arthur's personality through having him fumble and then figure out what's wrong, it doesn't work that well either. And I don't really know what the point of it was. Basically, Arthur shows up, and he's confronted by the intelligent Infernal and this old guy that has like a cone-shaped head. And then he tries to be badass, but something happens and he kind of cuts himself off. and then he gets like mollywopped by this infernal, and then he realizes that he was holding his sword in the wrong hand. So he switches hands, and then he can beat him in one go. But that bit there where he doesn't realize what hand he's holding the sword with is weird. Like, how do you not realize that? Like, he's supposed to be this suave character, or this cool guy, and then he just doesn't end up being that in this part of the story. And I don't really understand what the point of that was, and I really don't like how it came off. But you know, it is what it is. We'll move on from that. Then we have Iris and Hibana's backstory, which is actually really interesting. It basically, Hibana and Iris were two girls that lived in this nun house, I guess. This like orphanage run by a nun. And it was an all-girls orphanage. And all the girls were nuns for this fire religion that they have in this world, right? And Hibana is the oldest one. And she also has fire powers, which makes flowers. And Iris is the youngest, and she's very shy. And so one day, Hibana is showing off her powers, and she brings Iris over, and they connect. They become friends. They become kind of like, buddies. And then Hibana gets chastised for using her fire powers. And then Iris asks her to show her flowers again later, as a kind of a show of camaraderie. Be like, it's okay, you got chastised, I still like them, don't worry, kind of thing. And then they make a promise. It's like, yes, I'll show them to you when you become a bold girl, because Iris is very shy, right? So Hibana tries to use it as a way to help her out. But one day they just go back to their nunnery, or to their nun place, and they see that all of their friends and all of the nuns that worked there were spontaneously combusted. And so Hibana basically breaks. She's like, why do we pray to this fire god if he does this to people that are most devoted to him, right? And so she breaks, she becomes psychotic, she goes crazy. And then Iris and Hibana basically end up going different ways. Iris eventually makes it to Company 8, and Hibana becomes a scientist, and eventually the leader of Company 5 through this kind of information exchange, I guess is the best way to put it. And so that backstory is really, really good. It makes a lot of sense for Hibana and Iris to be the way they are, and for their relationship to cause them to act the way they do. So I really like it. Shinra shows up, and he's like, I'm going to be a hero. It doesn't matter. And sometimes heroes need to save the people that they are fighting, so that's what I'm going to do. And so he fights her. He manages to beat her, even though Hibana has this very interesting ability to stop people from moving due to like severe heat stroke, basically, and it works really, really well. I like that fight a lot. We get a little bit more backstory, and then the conflict ends by having Shinra beat Hibana. And it actually ends up being a kind of funny situation there, where Hibana becomes infatuated with Shinra because he manages to beat her. And there's this certain strength that she associates with Shinra now that she finds attractive. Then they kind of cover up the fact that they fought by saying that the 5th and 8th Company were actually doing a joint training operation that was based on surprise situations, right? So overall, very good stuff. And then they work together, and they realize that sometimes human combustion is done on purpose. It's not always spontaneous, and they have to figure out why this is the case. And so going forward, they're going to work together to figure that out. And I think that's really, really good. I really enjoyed this story quite a bit. But the Arthur thing really downs the quality of this arc, because it doesn't make any sense at all within the story. So, that sucks, but it is what it is. Characters-wise, we get Hibana mostly. We get Iris, of course, and they have a very interesting, very meaningful backstory. We get introduced to Toru Kishiri, who has a special fire bubblegum ability, which is really, really cool. And the Five Angels 3, which is actually a whole bunch of people that all basically look the same and they dress the same. And they're kind of funny, but also not that great. Kind of reminds me of the Butt Jiggle Gang from Fairy Tail, if you guys know what that is. I don't know, it's kind of just dumb. And we get Conehead, who's this kind of psycho scientist guy, which is cool. In terms of world building, we get a lot of cool powers here. Mostly Hinawa's. His power gets explained a lot, and it's very, very cool. I quite liked it a lot. It was very, very awesome. We get explanations about the religion a little bit, and the human combustion origin story gives us a hint. So overall, very meaningful, very important types of stuff happening here, but it's not it's not as enjoyable to me as the first part of the story, even though there's a lot more like stuff to sink your teeth into. So it's kind of interesting how that works out for me. So yeah, artwork and fan service wise, the art style is really, really good. There's a little bit of fan service here, but it's kind of sus. It kind of feels more like a complaint I had a long time ago when I read what was it that I read? Well, I don't know. I don't remember what I read, but the complaint was that the fan service aspects are played up for to satisfy this kind of dangerous feeling, this kind of almost sexual assault type of feeling, and at least the way that it's portrayed. Now, I understand that sometimes this is kind of to play into sadism and masochism and stuff like that, but sometimes it doesn't really work. And I think that in this case, it's when it doesn't work, because it just looks really horrible to have Hibana and Iris, who are friends, and then Hibana just drastically humiliate Iris in the way that she does in this kind of fan service scene. So I don't really like it in that sense, but I also think that in terms of fan service and the fact that Fire Force has fan service that usually is not sensical, in this case Hibana doing that to Iris is sensical because it fits in with Hibana's worldview to do this thing, but it's something that I just didn't feel was necessary, even though it fits perfectly into the story. And in this case, it's not because it was unnecessary or ridiculous. It's mostly because it felt a little too dark for my taste. So there you go. That's how I feel about that this time. In terms of a rating, it's a 4 out of 5. And honestly, it's a 4 out of 5 because the kind of Arthur fight, the way that he interacts in this story, just didn't work for me. And also, while I was reading it, I feel like the translation or the editing of the translation was a little bit off. And so sometimes I was reading parts of the story, dialogue bubbles, and the dialogue bubbles didn't make sense. And it made reading it kind of a little bit difficult. So it's partially the storytelling that happens here that makes it a little bit less enjoyable. It's also partially the reading experience created by the translation. Now, I don't know if this is because Okubo writes in a way that's difficult to translate or what, but I think it's mostly an editing issue, because sometimes you translate something and it can be a literal translation or a meaning-based translation, but if it doesn't read well, it doesn't matter that it's accurate because it doesn't work in certain languages, right? So I feel they really should have gone with a finer tooth comb to do the editing and kind of change things a little bit so that it would be a little bit better and more easy to understand. But that might be a me thing. So, mileage may vary with that issue. If you guys have had something like that happen to you before while reading Fire Force, please let me know down in the comments, just so I know I'm not crazy. But that's all I have to say. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know your thought. And thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.